Greetings and welcome back to room 303, our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poems of Emily Dickinson contained within the Johnson edition. This is poem number 57, to venerate the simple days. And I think the key words here are venerate and simple. And I think so much about Emily's stuff is about veneration and about simplicity. Scholars have pointed out that almost a third of Emily's poems have to do with the questions of mortality and death. So it won't shock us. And in fact, we're in a run of about 9 poems that all in some way or another treat death and dying. And one of the mistakes that many readers have made, with the exception of poem 55, which, as we said, was more of a celebration poem, but you got about 9 poems here that all kind of treat this. And we have said this about the work of Emily. If all you do is study 1 or 2 of her poems, you can have a, I would call it, slanted view of what her poetry is all about. Some have said, oh, she's such a dark poet because she writes so much about death. Well, that's obviously poem 55 proves it. That's not always true. Speaking of 55, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down the left-hand side, our playlist again is Chats with Emily. I'm hopeful that you've been exposed to our introductory set of comments already, and I'm hopeful that you've read the previous 56 poems so that you can place this poem in some kind of context. Now, I've said this already, and scholars have pointed this out, that one of the most significant things about Emily's life is that there at Pleasant Street, right out the back door, she saw the cemetery. And so she was constantly thinking about what she saw beyond her garden, obviously, the cemetery. And I think that's significant. She will use the word venerate once and only once in all of her poetry, and it's right here. To venerate the simple days, which lead the seasons by, needs but to remember that from you or I, they may take the trifle termed mortality. Now, we'll see the word simple in the poem 441, Simple News. You'll remember this is my letter to the world. And I think this idea of veneration of the simple really matters. I think it matters in the reading of Emily's poetry. Notice, to venerate the simple days which lead the seasons by, the cyclical nature of life, obviously, is mortality is the end of that. Needs but to remember. In other words, life seems so predictable, so simple, so circular, and yet, only because we have a tendency to forget, as sometimes we've pointed out, that Emily will make that argument that really the only sin is to forget. It's all about remembering, trying to remember. We got to remember that from you or I, they may take the trifle, and when we hit poem 1013, the dying is a trifle past, her use of this word trifle. I think the word simple and the word trifle move together nicely in this poem. They may take the trifle termed mortality. When we get to poem 1136, we forgot mortality will play rather nicely with this set of lines. In other words, what is the point here at 2a? I think the argument that she's making is that we have this tendency to forget in the simpleness of life, in the veneration of life, that the other side of that coin of life is obviously death. That is to say, we can only, as we've said many times, you can only swing at the park for so long. They were teaching us to us when we were children. It's time to go to the van, honey. I don't want to go to the van. I want to keep swinging. No, you can't swing at the park forever. Everybody's got to go to the van. Nobody's met a 200-year-old person. It's a significant insight, right? And because that's the case, it obviously makes us not just venerate life, but obviously venerate death as well. I think that's the key word choice at 2b, along with the word simple, veneration. And the idea that mortality, did you notice it was italicized in this poem? I think that's also interesting. At 3a, there's so many titles that we could throw together. Think about Dickens' Christmas Carol, that Scrooge is not prepared for that third ghost. The first ghost takes him to his past, he's mad. The second ghost takes him to his present, he's still mad. That's that third ghost who doesn't say anything, shows up, takes him what? To the graveyard, shows him what? His tombstone. It's at that moment that Scrooge is ready to fall down and just beg on his knees and just beg for one more day. Why? Because he had lived his life without venerating the end of the life, without respecting that, oh no, it's time for you to leave. And of course, he awakens from his dream, and Dickens will tell us that he proves true after that. Why? Because he's seen what really it means to venerate both life as well as death. And finally, at 3b, how do you deal with this trifle termed mortality? And to what degree is reading Emily's poetry opening up new fields for that whole thought? Thank you.